Welcome, friends, to Legendmakers. This is a special interview show for our convention, Legendhaven. Today, we're joined by Sisters Grace and Sister Allison. They're editors at Pauline Books Media. Welcome, sisters.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're so glad to have you here at the con. Go ahead.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about what traditional publishing is. We're going to go through some of the advantages of going with the traditional publisher to publish your book. And then we're also going to share a couple tips for getting picked up with a traditional publisher.
All right, fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm just going to recuse myself and let you two take it away.
Thanks.
So to start with, what is traditional publishing? Traditional publishing is easily distinguished from any other form because in traditional publishing, the publisher pays the author for the right to publish the book. If the author pays the publisher, then that's some other form of publishing. That's the basic definition.
So one of the big advantages of traditional publishing is that you as the author are not paying for things, you're getting paid. So like the types of costs that are usually associated with putting a book out are all covered by the publisher. So that would include anything that has to do with the editing, copy editing, or proofreading of your manuscript, all of the pagination and interior design, the cover design. So usually as a publishing house, we would be contracting an outside designer or artist to do that. Any illustrations, if you have a book, especially children's books with lots of illustrations, but sometimes adults' books have different interior illustrations as well. We would be paying for the person to do that. Any file preparation for the printer, the printing and the shipping of the book, all of the file preparation for the ebook and the publication for the ebook, and any form of marketing for the book would also be paid for by the publisher.
So traditional publishing has advantages even before your book goes to print. The most important thing, well, according to us editors, the most important benefit is the editing, in-depth editing from an objective viewpoint. So like you edit your own book, but having someone else with an objective viewpoint is very helpful. And it's by experienced editors who have done this a lot on different types of books. And also the editors are part of the publishing house that is invested in your book. So self-published authors can hire a good editor, but that editor doesn't have is not invested in the final version of your book and how well it does. In our publishing house, our editors work collaboratively with the authors. So all the stages of the editing, there's no editing done that the author doesn't see or have input into. We work on the editing until both parties are happy with the manuscript and the author sees it multiple times. So each round of editing, and then before and after it's paginated again, there's opportunity for input. So many authors that we've worked with have said how much they appreciate this attention in detail to their work. And the whole point is to make your book more what it is. That's the purpose. It's not to change it into something that you don't like or recognize. I know that this is a fear that a lot of people have in coming to a traditional publisher.
So besides the editing help that a traditional publisher gives, there's a lot of help in the professional design of the book too. So we're going to use some examples from books that we've recently published. So one of the things that is important is the interior design of the book, the readability, kind of how it's paginated. And a lot of times this is more than just making sure the font is good. You know, it can also communicate the atmosphere of the book. So in this example, in Extreme Blindside, this is a teen novel that's kind of a mystery, romance, and snowboarding story. And it includes multiple characters with different perspectives. And so for each of the different characters, they have their own fonts and their own styles that are shown in the book to show their different personalities. So even in the interior design, something is being communicated beyond just the words on the page. Besides the interior design, there's also the cover design. And as I mentioned earlier, the cover design is often contracted to someone outside, an outside designer or an outside illustrator who's well suited to kind of communicate the vision of the book well on the front cover. And so these two examples are from recent manga that we've done on the saints. And as you'll see, Saint Bernadette, sorry, is it's a shoujo manga, generally for girls, and it's a very girly style, very soft and gentle to kind of communicate Bernadette's personality. Whereas the Saint Nicholas, he's got a lot more action. This is a shonen manga, more geared towards boys. And so the art style, even on the front cover and the way the cover is designed, is helping to communicate the content of the book. So the cover design is very intentional, and we spend a lot of time working with designers and illustrators to make the cover like as good as it can be. The other part of this professional design is collaboration with the illustrator to uphold the vision of the book. So if you're doing a book that has illustrations, that's something that the author does not have to find the illustrator and figure all that out. It's the publisher will work with them to kind of figure out what the vision of the book is and who would best be able to illustrate that. So we have an example. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Brambley Hedge books.
We did not publish this.
We did not publish this. Sorry. This was the inspiration for. We had they're very darling books of kind of little creatures, very cozy cottagecore aesthetics going on here. And one of the authors that we published with recently came to us with this idea for a book, and she's like, I want it to feel like Brambley Hedge, kind of like in the art. And so when we were doing the art for this Sister Seraphina Mysteries, which take place in the early 1900s with an order of mouse nuns, we found an artist who was able to kind of take that Brambley Hedge style and make it her own to fit with this style of the book to really uphold the author's original vision. So that collaboration with the illustrator and like close working with them is also one of the advantages of traditional publishing. And then beyond that, you have all of the expertise from the past books that we've done, and the editing and design are done in collaboration with the team. So you have, like, it's not just you and what you know about your book that is going forward. It's also everything that we know as a publisher can help your book move forward in this design and editing, and how to best reach the target audience. And the editing and the design is going to be unified because we're all working as one publishing house team to do this. So yeah, we can just move on. Okay. So yeah, Sister Grace is going to talk about now, besides this, what happens after your book goes to print.
After your book goes to print, there's also great advantages. And the basic thing is the substantial help in marketing your book. So again, the publishing house, the marketing department of the publishing house is invested in the success of your book. So some kinds of marketing that happen, again, not every type of marketing happens for every book. But for example, we obtain endorsements beforehand for most of our books, not all of the children's books, but endorsements from well-known names or people who have expertise. And we get those ahead of time so that they can be on the back cover or inside the book. We get articles done on the book, listings and catalogs, coverage by organizations like Publishers Weekly. Sometimes we have also like events, and we line up interviews with podcasters or radio or TV shows, that kind of thing. We do, and our social media accounts do promotion for the books, video interviews maybe, or book trailers, things like that. We do a lot of review copies for all of our books, and that is when the book is usually right when it comes from the printer, or occasionally galley copies ahead of time. We send out a lot of free copies to people who are potential reviewers, influencers who can post about the book ahead of time. So those are all great advantages in the marketing of your book.
So that doesn't mean that you as the author don't also do marketing. Like if you have ideas, one of the things that we usually do with our authors is coming up with a personalized marketing plan for their book, working with them with whatever kind of platform or channels you have or networking that you've already done to kind of springboard off of that to help your book do even better based on the resources that we have. And beyond the marketing, we also have multiple distribution channels available to us that are not always available to self-published authors. So one of those channels is through traditional retail, kind of brick and mortar bookstores. And what you'll often find is that there are a lot of independent small bookstores who can't order self-published books necessarily. from individuals. And that's not because they don't like self-published books or they hate you or anything. It's usually because they have certain publishers and distributors that they order from, like that they have accounts with, and they can kind of only order from those people. So if you're not part of one of those publishers or one of those distributors, they don't have a way to put you in their system to get your book into their store necessarily. So those distributors are another thing that we have access to as a publisher. So these would be the companies, like the big companies that libraries and stores would buy from. So if you can get your book into libraries, that has a way further reach than just having one kid buy it in a bookstore or one person buy it in a bookstore, because how many people will read the same book in the library? Like if you really want your book to get out there, going through these bigger distributors is really important. And then there's also the digital distribution and ebooks side of things. So on Amazon, they do have a lot of self-published things or things done from hybrid publishing. But there are a lot of other online stores or ways that people access ebooks or can electronically get to the book that are not Amazon, that are not necessarily open to individual authors not working with a larger company. So that's something that we also have access to. And then finally, one exciting thing is that your book could be licensed by publishers in other countries and translated into other languages. So this type of third-party licensing is organized by your publisher, and the publisher may even seek out opportunities to have your book go to other countries. So this is one example of a book. Sister Grace here is actually the author of these. It's the Gospel Time Checkers book. So that's in English, and then that's the Czech version that got licensed in the Czech Republic. So, it's cool to see your book take form and go around the world even. It doesn't just have to stay here in North America.
Now we just want to go through some of the some tips for getting picked up by a traditional publisher. First of all, how to find a publisher. Different publishers publish different kinds of books, different audiences. So you need to look for one that publishes the kind of books you've written and the audience you're trying to reach. It's not to the advantage of the publisher or the author for the publisher to publish a book that they don't have a good distribution in to that audience, a way to reach them. So for example, you write young adult, you have to find a publisher that specializes in that. If you write fiction with a Catholic or Christian element, you look for a Catholic or Christian publisher that does fiction.
So our publishing house, Pauline Books Media, we don't do Catholic fiction for adults, but we do it for kids, teens, and young adults. So for example, if someone submits a project to us that's adult fiction, we automatically decline it because that's just not within the scope of what we publish. Or if someone sends us anything that has no Catholic element, which happens a lot, even though it's very obvious that we're nuns, like that's again, like we publish Catholic books. That's part of what our ministry is. And so even if it's a really good book that's not at all Catholic or Christian, we would not consider publishing that. So that's nothing personal. It's just not within the scope of our publishing house. So it's important to look into that ahead of time before you submit, because you don't want to waste your time and you don't want to waste the publisher's time. And so there's a couple ways that you can research publishers before you submit. One thing is that if there's a book that you're reading that you like, just look at who published it and see kind of where it came from. And then you can visit that publisher's website and look at their mission statement. And if they have their submission guidelines available online, you can look and see, oftentimes they'll specify the types of books that they publish. So you can very easily see if the book that you've written kind of falls into that. Another thing to do could be look into what that publisher has recently published and see if it kind of is in line with the book that you've written, or if it's something totally different. Maybe that's not the right place to send your book. And finally, if you're on social media, it's very easy to follow publishers or even to find book reviewers who are not publishers, and to just follow some different accounts that talk about books a lot and just pay attention. And if you see one that you like, or you like the types of things that they're doing, or you're like, wow, my book would fit right in here, that can help you find your niche too for the right publisher that would be good to go with.
And then once you've chosen a publisher or publishers that you would like to submit to, you need to make sure your manuscript is ready to submit. Don't submit an unpolished draft. Make sure you give it time, you do revisions. Here's an example of a book that we've published that we're just showing you a few drafts. This is the original first draft. and then edits on a typed draft, multiple rounds that look like this. And even after all of that, when it came to us, the publisher, the editor, with doing track changes, there's plenty of that still to be done. But all of these rounds helped it become a stronger book. Another way to do it, because we're only so much editing we can do of our own work, let someone else read it who either has some editing experience or is in your target audience, and especially if they're like willing to give honest feedback. If you're a mother and you write a book for kids and your children like it, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to be able to give you honest feedback. And then generally for fiction, your manuscript must be complete before it's submitted. It's different with nonfiction.
So when you're about to submit and you're pretty sure your manuscript is good to go, one really important thing to do first would be to read the publisher's submission guidelines and follow them carefully. So if the publisher asks for the manuscript to be formatted in a certain way or to include certain things, make sure you do it, because this is kind of like your first impression with these people. And if you're showing right from the get-go that you don't really care that much or you can't follow directions, that can be kind of a red flag. Even if your book is really good, it's like, but do they even care if they don't know how to submit their book the way that we ask them to? And then the other thing that's important is that when you submit a book, you're not just submitting the manuscript by itself. It also has to go with a proposal that you write. And so this is a really important step that sometimes people will skip over. But in the proposal, you would generally include a book pitch to like very quickly say what your book is about. You talk about who your target audience is and why they would want to read the book. You talk about what makes your book unique from other books on the market, other comparable titles. You talk about yourself, like who you are and why you're qualified to write this book. And then you also talk about different ideas for how the book could be marketed. And so I know that was a lot of things, but there's a lot of resources online. If you type in like how to write a book proposal, you can find different blog articles or different things to help you. But this is really an important step to take your time with and to make sure you do it well, because a rushed proposal is not going to help you. So one thing that you can do to make sure that it's good is to let someone read over it once you're done with it, who is totally unfamiliar with your book, like who doesn't know the idea behind it at all, who has not read the manuscript, and see how they respond to it to see if it works or not. So that can be one thing that would help.
So the last little thing here is, don't expect to hear back immediately from a publisher. Sometimes we have kind of a pileup of submissions, so sometimes it takes a little while. And don't be discouraged if you get turned down the first time. Look for other publishers, keep revising and working on your manuscript to make it the best it can be.
Yeah, and like I couldn't resist making a Rings of Power reference here, but keep in mind that like when Tolkien wrote the Silmarillion, the first publisher that he sent it to rejected the manuscript, and now Amazon's paying millions of dollars to try to get their hands on that and making spin-off series and all of these different things based off of it. So just because you don't meet with success right in the beginning doesn't mean you don't have a really good idea that could really change the world. So just like stick with it and don't become discouraged.
Thank you both, sisters. That was a fantastic breakdown of how the traditional publishing process goes. The final question I want to ask you is, in terms of the community we're putting together here at LegendFiction, when you mentioned that you publish Catholic fiction, what is the level of Catholic content that you look for in teen, YA, or children's fiction? How overt is the Catholicity? What do you look for?
Well, what we publish, we want something more overt, like some kind of Catholic element that is integral to the story is what we look for. There's lots of good books that could be written by Catholics that don't have that, but that's part of what we're looking for.
Yeah. So something that's just has a Catholic worldview, but does not at all actually touch on anything actually Catholic, like in a more explicit way, is not usually something that we would consider. If the Catholic themes were really strong, even if it was set in, some sort of sci-fi setting or fantasy setting, there's creative ways that could be tied in. Then it's something that we would consider if it was well written. But usually the reason why we reject manuscripts that are in these speculative fiction genres is because they're poorly written, not necessarily because they're not Catholic enough. So the most important thing is really having a really good book, a really strong manuscript, and having those Catholic elements really be a part of it, not just as an afterthought, but that really like they're well tied in and well integrated to the story.
Beautiful. Fantastic. Well, if people have additional questions or they're interested in reaching out to you to submit a book or find out what the submission guidelines are, where can they find you online?
Our submission guidelines are at pauline.org/submissions. We're both on Instagram. You can find us there.
And Twitter.
And she's on Twitter and not me.
Yeah, and there's also our publishing house also has an account on all the different social media things you can follow if you want to. But yeah, checking out our website, pauline.org, you can find a lot of information there about who we are and what we do. And the email to reach out to us, like if you're trying to reach the editorial department to submit a manuscript or something, you can find that by going to pauline.org/submissions. It lists our email address there.
Fantastic. Perfect. Well, thank you both so much, sisters. I hope that people got a lot of help, either at the con or if you're catching the replay afterwards. And if you haven't yet, come and check us out at legendfiction.com. We're building this creative community for modern Catholic and Orthodox authors. Join a private community to share your works in progress, give and get feedback, and make friends. Till next time, keep writing. We hope you enjoy the con. God bless you.